In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire process of creating what is honestly the strangest drawing I have ever created. And if you are new here, my name is Mothersole, and I've spent thousands of hours creating hundreds of realistic drawings of pretty much anything you can think of. Now you can probably tell from the thumbnail and the shots I showed you in the intro that I'm drawing a tree, but this is actually a very special tree. You see, it's a commissioned piece for one of my top collectors who is after my interpretation of the two Trees of Valinor from Lord of the Rings, but a LEGOfied version. Now you may be thinking, okay, so you just mentioned two trees, so why have you only drawn one trunk? And the thing is, I actually agreed with my collector that combining the two trees into one tree would be a better option because it would be a lot cleaner and tidier than having two trees wrapping around each other. And by doing this, we get this really nice sharp contrast between the yellow on the left and the blue on the right. And another thought that may have crossed your mind is, well, this doesn't exist in real life. LEGO hasn't made a tree like this. And yeah, that is right. What I had to do was I went to an AI image generator, so I kind of like confronted the enemy, so to speak, and then I used this to get like the backbone for this piece. So you can see that I took a lot of inspiration from the trunk, but obviously the leaves here, they're just kind of standard leaves. So I actually had to go onto Google and then search up some photos of Lego leaves, and then I substituted this Lego leaf in the position of each of the leaves on the AI image. And as you can imagine, drawing 300 leaves all at different angles, orientations, and overlapping one another was a very time-consuming process. If you include the time it took me to do the trunk, this entire sketch took me about 9 hours to do. And once it was done, I could rub it out. Well, I mean, partially using a kneadable eraser, which I'm just using in a dabbing motion over the entire thing to just remove the excess graphite that would otherwise mix and muddy all the colors that I'll be putting on top. And because I'm using an airbrush to add a background next, what I need to do is protect the sketch that I've just done using something called frisket film. The best way I can describe it is just a giant sheet of sellotape that I can just stick onto the drawing. Now obviously I want my background to go all the way up to the edges of my sketch, which means that I need to cut around the sketch through the frisket film and then remove the parts on the outside. So this basically involved just reliving all the sketching that I just done, so going around all the grooves, the individual pieces, all the leaves again, but with a scalpel this time. And you can see towards the end here that I actually wrap a load of masking tape around the scalpel because my fingers were honestly dying after this, because it was about an hour and a bit worth of just solid cutting. And once I'd gone around the entire thing, it was time to remove the film from the outside. And I'd like to try and do this in like one go, like when you peel an orange and you try to get the peel off in one peel, if that makes sense. But because the amount of film that I was trying to remove was like so large, it was really hard to do this, so I ended up just cutting parts off as I was going along. Now, as well as protecting the sketch, I also want to protect the edges, so I'm just using some masking tape here. And what this is doing is it means that after I've done the background and basically finished the piece, when I remove this masking tape at the end, I'll end up with this really nice white border around the entire piece, which makes it just better suited for mounting in a frame, because obviously we're not covering up any colored surface with the mount. So now that everything is protected, it is time to start on the background, and I'm kicking things off with some black paint. And it's essential with this background that I am showing that the trees are glowing, and by doing this I'm using the black most prominently around the outside and getting lighter as I'm getting closer to the actual tree. Now you may notice that I've actually added a shadow to the bottom of the tree, and when I sent a progress picture to my collector, he actually pointed out the fact that surely if the tree is glowing then there wouldn't be a shadow beneath the tree, and that's actually right. But luckily I plan on adding some light mist to the bottom of the tree in the final stages, and then this will help cover up the shadow and make it look a lot lighter. Now to add the yellow glow to the left hand side of the tree, I'm kicking things off with some very light orange paint and using this on the intersection where the darkest part of the black starts to become a little bit lighter. I then added a little bit of yellow to that original orange paint to make it a little bit lighter, and then used this color a little bit closer to the tree. I then do a very similar thing to the right hand side in order to get the blue glow, but I'm actually starting off with a slightly darker blue, and again using this over the intersection where the black becomes a little bit lighter, and then I add some white paint to that original blue paint to do the area next to the tree. Now once I'm happy that I've got this foundation for the background in place, because obviously I'm going to tweak some things once all the coloured pencil work is done, I can remove the frisket film to reveal the sketch, which I can then start colouring in. So I'm kicking off the colouring process on the left-hand side of the trunk, so obviously the brown side. And what you can see me doing here is the base layer first, so I'm doing this with alcohol markers. And the reason I'm doing a base layer before coming in with the coloured pencils is because obviously I want this to look really nice and solid, like actual Lego pieces. And the key to doing this is to have this foundational layer so that you don't get those white speckles from the paper showing through the coloured pencil work a bit later. And once I've jotted in all the tones with the markers, it's time to come in with the coloured pencils. And the key with this was to make sure that all of the faces of the pieces that are pointing upwards towards the glowing leaves have slight yellow and orange tinges to them, because obviously the leaves are emitting a slightly yellow light source, so all the surfaces that it's reflecting onto will also have a slight yellow or orange tinge to them. And once I was happy with how things were looking on the left-hand side, I could move over to the right-hand side. And obviously here we have that silvery blue color, but the key here was to try and get the transition from the left-hand side to the right-hand side as smooth as possible. So some of the pieces directly down the middle, I have certain faces of them that are brown and then certain faces of them that are blue, just to make the transition from the really, really warm left side to the really, really cold right side as smooth as possible. And just like before, once I'm done with the markers, I come in with the colored pencils. And if you're wondering, I am using Caran d'Ache luminance pencils and Faber-Castell polychromos, and the key with this to try and make the pieces look as solid as possible is to use lots and lots of layers, where I'm pressing harder and harder with each layer until I achieve something called burnishing. And this is the point where I push the colored pencil pigment as far as I can into the grains of the paper so that there's just no graininess anymore, so it looks really nice and smooth like actual Lego pieces. Now at this point I'd spent quite a bit of time working on the trunk, so I thought, you know what, I'll give myself a bit of a break from the trunk and do some of the leaves. And I do them in the exact same way as the trunk by doing a base layer first and then coming on top with the colored pencils. And the basic leaf anatomy that I was adhering to was having the sides of them as this brown, and also using this exact same brown in the center of the stud hole, as well as the lines that are going down each of the individual leaves. Then I used an intermediary yellow to do the area surrounding the stud and the tips of the leaves, because what's happening is the leaves are slightly wrapping downwards, so they're actually slightly darker than the main part of the leaf. Now coming back to doing the trunk, and you can see that the pieces closer to the leaves are obviously a lot more yellow and brighter than the ones closer to the base of the tree. And this is obviously because the leaves are the light source in this case, so the pieces next to the light source are obviously going to be a lot brighter. And one thing I forgot to mention when talking about the leaves is that I'm making sure that the colors are very contrasting. Now, contrast is just the difference in tonal value between the darkest and the lightest areas. So you can see here that I've got those really, really dark browns next to those really, really bright yellows. And by having this really sharp contrast, it obviously helps to make the leaves pop, and they also look shiny. And obviously that's helping to emphasize that glow effect. Now, obviously we've got all of these leaves, but we need the branches in order to connect up all of the leaves. And you may notice that I'm not always necessarily using official Lego pieces or indeed conventional Lego building techniques, because the way that I've laid out the leaves could just never happen on an actual Lego set, or at least not a current one. They may be able to do it in the future. So I think, yes, it's going to annoy some diehard Lego fans who are like, well, you couldn't build this in real life. But on the other hand, it does make it really quite unique and special to me as an artist. Now, the next challenge I had to deal with was getting the transition from the yellow and brown leaves and branches of the left-hand side to the blue and silver branches and leaves of the right-hand side as smooth as possible. And the main problem with this is that when you mix blue and yellow together, you get green. And obviously we do not want green on this piece. So I actually had to keep them separate. And you can see here by having leaves that are half blue and half yellow, it actually works. And the transition between the left-hand side and the right-hand side is actually pretty smooth. And once I'd established this halfway point, it was literally just a case of doing everything that I spoke about on the left-hand side, but with a completely different color palette, because obviously we're using grays and blues over here. And I'm actually really happy with the silvery effect that I have created on these leaves. And if I'm being honest, towards the end of this process, I was starting to see leaves in my sleep. I think in total, I must have spent around 30 hours just drawing the same Lego leaf over and over and over again. And there is literally no way of sugarcoating it, but this final area of leaves was just an absolute drag. It just kept going on and on. It was like, I'm so close yet so far away. But it's really important here that I didn't start rushing through, because obviously that would ruin everything I've done up to this point. And one thing you may notice is I have all of these white gaps between the leaves and branches. So I come back in with my airbrush using an orange paint that's even lighter than I used earlier, and I carefully fill in all the gaps on the left hand side. Then I do the exact same thing to the right hand side, but with a light blue paint. And to really help emphasize the fact that the leaves are glowing, I use a very, very light yellow paint over the top of the entirety of the yellow side, and then do the exact same thing to the right hand side, but with a very, very light blue paint. And the very last thing I do is I add the light mist to the very bottom. So I'm using some really kind of wafty and loose airbrush strokes here. And then I come in with the very, very light yellow paint on the left hand side, and then in with the very, very light blue paint on the right hand side. And all that's left to do now is to remove the tape from the edges of the piece to leave me with a really nice clean white border. So here it is, my interpretation of the 2 Trees of Valinor from Lord of the Rings, but a LEGOfied version. I really hope you've enjoyed watching it come to life. I'm honestly super happy with the results. And if you'd like me to create a custom piece for you, you can check out more information about that down in the description. And yeah, as always, if you have enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I shall see you in the next one, which will appear on screen right over here. So yeah, thank you for watching.